Hello class, this is Demetrius Wilson with BA156. We are now on to Chapter 2, Delivering Your Message, which is very, very important. The way and the manner in which you deliver your message, no matter who your target audience is, or your unintended audience as well. Our learning objectives for Chapter 2 are describe and define language. Know if you just say language, and most of us would just think, what language do you speak, whether it's English, Spanish, Chinese, Japanese. Describe the role or language in perception and the communication process. Sometimes what we perceive and how we perceive things is reality in terms of what we think. And we'll talk about the communication process and how things are encoded, decoded, and delivered to others. Describe 3 different types of messages and their functions. Describe 5 different parts of a message and their functions. Go on to the next. A few more learning objectives. Identify and describe 5 key principles of verbal communication. Explain how the rules of syntax, semantics, and context govern language. Describe how language serves to shape our experience of reality. We also have objectives of demonstrating 6 ways in which language can be an obstacle or barrier to communication. A lot of times, if 2 people don't speak the same language, it could be a barrier, but there could be other things in reference to language that could be a barrier as well. Explain the difference between cliches, jargon, and slang. Explain the difference between sexist or racist language and legitimate references to gender and or race in business communication. Describe and define 4 strategies that can give emphasis to your message, right? Put that big extra stamp on it. Demonstrate the effective use of visuals in an oral or written presentation. And demonstrate the effective use of signposts, internal summaries, and foreshadowing and repetition in an oral or written presentation. And list and explain the use of 6 strategies for improving verbal communication. How can we improve the communication that I have between myself and you, right, in this lecture, and the verbal communication that you have between your family, friends, and colleagues. Demonstrate the appropriate use of definitions in oral or written presentation. Understand how to assess the audience. Choose an appropriate tone. And check for understanding and result in oral and written presentation. So appropriate tone would be appropriate for me to just yell the entire lecture. So what is language? It's a system of symbols, words, and or gestures used to communicate meaning, right? So in our native language, English, right, a symbol, we have words that we speak. Hi, how are you? Those are the words. And or gestures, right? So some people, gesture certain things and you know exactly what they mean. Some good, some not so bad, or some not so good. And gestures used to communicate a specific meaning. It's bound by context. Depends on which context you're in, right? So if you're in a sporting event and you have a fist like that, that means, yeah, I just scored a touchdown. But if you're about to, looking at someone very aggressively, yelling at them, and you're going like that, that means that you probably want to fight. So it depends on the context. So types of messages, you have your primary message. That's the message that I'm trying to get across. Intentional content, both verbal and nonverbal, right? So that's the content that you intentionally tried to relay to whoever it was. You have secondary messages. That's unintentional, right? So I'm telling you that the sky is blue, but I'm also telling you that the sky is not green. So you have secondary messages that are unintentional, but nevertheless, that's what people understand, both verbal and nonverbal. And then you have auxiliary messages, intentional and unintentional ways a primary message is communicated. So what is the function of your message? So your primary message, express yourself and communicate your message, right? That's what you want to do. I want to communicate my message in a clear and efficient manner. Secondary messages form impressions of your internal message or your intentional messages, right? And auxiliary messages influence the interpretation or perception of your actual message, because perception is very, very important. Parts of the message, you have your attention statement, right? You need to grab and get your attention, captures the attention of your audience. Then you have your introduction, establishes a relationship with your audience, right? So you'll need to find some common ground. The body presents your message in detail, right? That's the meat of it. Conclusion provides the audience with a sense of closure by summarizing your main points and relating to them to the overall topic, right? So you can come to a conclusion, get a good summary. And then you have your residual message, stays with the audience after the communication is finished, right? It's always there. Every time you hear this jingle, I think about Nationwide. Our reality is shaped by our language. The ever-changing and growing nature of your language determines your reality. Paradigms may be individual, and they could also be collective. So language organizes and clarifies reality, right? So a lot of people perceive things, but you can say sometimes it's not reality because it's not accurate or real. We often group words according to their physical proximity or similarity to one another, right? So how close they are, and in terms of, in space and also in definition. Categories become problematic when used to uphold biases and invalid assumptions, right? So we don't want to be biased, and we don't want to have invalid assumptions. So just as we talked about earlier about it being an obstacle, so that the language can be an obstacle to communication. Not always. And language, creates communication, but it can also sometimes at times be an obstacle. So cliche, a once clever word / phrase. Phrase that has lost its impact through overuse, right? So people use it over and over and over again, right? Those things, those word phrases that go out, they're no longer cool. Jargon, an occupation-specific language used by people in a given profession. And the thing that you have to really be careful with jargon is that you don't want to use that with customers or to people that are outfacing that aren't within your company that don't know what you're talking about. And I don't, me personally, I don't like acronyms. I just like to spell everything out so there's no confusion and people really understand. Slang is the use of existing or newly invented words to take the place of traditional words with the intent of adding unconventional, non-standard, humorous / rebellious effort. Sexist language use gender as a discriminating factor. Racist language discriminates against members of a given race or ethnic group. Euphemism involves substituting an acceptable word for an offensive, controversial / unacceptable one that conveys the same or similar meaning. And then lastly, but not least, doublespeak, deliberate use of words to disguise, obscure, and change the actual meaning. So you have emphasis strategies. We talked about that in terms of visual communication, signposts, internal summaries, and foreshadowing. Like maybe someone didn't understand everything that I said, so we're going to go back and then we're going to go and have a summary of what we reviewed. And then repetition over and over again. The better you do, the more you do something, the better you get, right? Same thing goes with communication. The more you do it, the more you communicate, the better you get. But if you're not communicating, then don't expect for things to move forward and progress exponentially because you actually have to do it. Visual communication. Visual should support your presentation, not take the place of it. That's like me going through this PowerPoint slide, just not saying anything. Let's just go through each slide, leave it there for 4 or 5 minutes, or 4 or 5 seconds, then move on to the next slide. Right? There's nothing else there. But these, like the PowerPoint, is a visual, and it should support the presentation that I'm speaking to you right now. Should be clearly associated with the verbal content. Should repeat, reinforce, and extend the scope of your message, right? So you're going to rehash it at the very end. Signposts, indicators, keywords that alert the audience to a change in topic, right? Now we're going to shift and start talking about skateboards instead of bikes. A tangential explanation, right? An example, and then a conclusion, right? So we want to have that conclusion and let people know, like, hey, it's time to wrap things up. Here's my conclusion. Internal summaries and foreshadowing help the audience keep track of where they are in the actual message, right? So that's always good because people get off track, be paying attention to other things. Reviews what has been covered, right? So we want to see what we have covered and what's next. And highlights what is coming next, right? Because people really get excited about what's coming next, especially coming from departments like marketing. Reinforces relationships between points, examples, and ideas in the message. Use of repetition, right? Practice makes perfect, or does perfect practice make perfect? So to help your audience retain the key points of the message in their memory, there's some things that you have to do. You have to follow these strategies of improving verbal communication. So define your terms, choose precise words, right? You don't want to use loose or jargon. or slang or anything like that. You want to consider your audience, right? Who's your audience? Who are you speaking with? You want to take control of your tone. Some people have people that just yell, right? You have to bring your tone down a little bit. Then you want to check for understanding. It's okay to ask questions, because if you have that question, everybody else has the same question and possibly more. And then be results oriented, right? So you have to be results oriented. You have to be looking at results. So what were our results today? I've been here about a month. What are my results going to be after that time period? And that's anything in life that you want to be results oriented. You want to define your terms. Do not define each and every term in the presentation. For an example, I'm not going to describe every single term in the PowerPoint presentation. A lot of that is for you to go back and review if you need to, and then you also have this video. Try defining terms by giving examples, right? So you want to give, and I've heard that before, you want to give specific examples about individuals. Now, not something that, you can't, relay, like say if you're letting someone go, but giving examples of things that have happened, great thing. It really clears things up, helps people to connect the dots and learn and understand. Choose very precise words. So choose precise words that paint as vivid and accurate a mental picture as possible for your audience. So vivid, but remember, accurate is also on there to increase their understanding. Consider your audience. You have to know who your audience is. Give careful attention to contextual clues. And sometimes people don't want you to know who your audience is. So if you want to, make sure that you always stay on your game. So take control of tone. So read your document out loud before you deliver it, right? So for instance, I always read the PowerPoint or review the PowerPoint presentation prior to doing this video. If I didn't, then I would come up with different slides and I would possibly be lost. So read your document out loud before you deliver it. It's always good to read it. All of us don't need to read it out loud, but you definitely need to review it. Listen or watch others. Presentations that have been described with terms associated with tone, right? So you want to look at a video with somebody with a lot of tone, look at somebody who has just the right amount of tone. And you want to seek out and be receptive to feedback. A lot of times people aren't receptive to feedback. Reason, I don't know. It's only going to help you grow, make you get better. Typically, when you're looking for feedback, it's for a reason, because these group of people have these type of problems. And you want to fix the problem, especially as a company dealing with customers. But you want to make sure that you're receptive to feedback. And how do I get feedback in my workplace? We reach out to each and every member, and we ask them, a specific set of questions. So you want to check for understanding. That's very, very important, because you can say all these great elaborate words and everything and then leave, and the person has no clue what you just said. So if the audience doesn't understand, you can ask questions and clarify right away, right? So, it's okay to raise your hand and say, hey, please clarify. Be results oriented. And that's always going to hold true whether you're talking about this class, any other class in life. You want to be results oriented. Tasks can be completed if so. What are the steps that I need to do to complete the task, and what things can I kind of get out of my roadmap? You've done your presentation. You know your assignment goals and desired results. You have learned about your audience and tailored the message to their expectations, right? So it's always good to tailor a message to that in one individual or one company's their expectations, and then you can possibly change it later. And that's it for chapter 2. But remember, you are responsible for chapter 3 for this week as well. So chapter 1 was kind of easy. You just had one chapter during the first week. And then now you have 2 chapters, and that's going to be the same way all throughout chapter 2 and chapter 3. But that's it for chapter 2. Make sure that you watch the video, watch the supplemental videos, read the chapter, and take any of the applicable quizzes and or complete any of the available homework assignments. So that's it. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to email me. I will always respond. Thanks a lot, and hope you have a great day.